Welcome back. You're watching a live broadcast here from the ANC's 53rd elective conference in Manguang. We are talking tough policy questions, and today our guest is Ebrahim Patel. He's the Minister for Economic Development. We will now be taking questions from the business community who have gathered here to join us in discussion with the Minister. My first question, or rather the first question, is going to be asked by Sizwe from FNB. Sizwe.
Good morning again, Minister. This question is not so much from myself, but comes from our investor clients and also entrepreneur and business clients that we deliberate with from time to time. And it's this seeming disconnect between what are brilliant policies on paper and accountability on the ground. And one can cite several examples, for example, school textbooks and so on. So could you perhaps clarify what could possibly be done or what is going to be done about enhancing accountability in terms of implementation to close the gap between, so that there isn't a disconnect between, brilliant policies and what actually happens on the ground? Thank you.
Okay, can we have the second question, please?
Hello. Hi, my name is Ryk Finneker. I come from MoneyWeb. Minister, two quick questions. There's been a significant drop in foreign direct investments into South Africa. A lot of international companies rather prefer to invest in other countries like Australia. Just your views on that. And then the second question on, in the mining industry, one of the systemic problems is garnishee orders and the abuse of unsecured lending. Just your comments on how that will be resolved. Thanks.
Third question.
Thank you, Minister. My name is Justice Ledoba. I'm from Lephalale Business Forum. Minister, the policies, like Sizwe have indicated, we have got brilliant policies in South Africa. However, these policies are compromised by two things. One, cadre deployment. We have realized that the ANC government has come up with very nice programs, but implementation of their programs is compromised by cadres who are not competent or equal to the task. The second thing, we have got conflict of interest in terms of people working for government and also wanting to do business with government. That is, creating a very good environment for corruption and fraud to take place. How are you going to mitigate that? Thanks.
Minister.
Well, thank you for the three questions. Let me start with the disconnect between policy and delivery. I think we recognize that's our central challenge. And let me illustrate what we can do about it, but let me also recognize that we need to do a lot more across a much wider front. On infrastructure, we've recognized since 1994 that infrastructure is important. But the President tells the story about how he came in as MEC for Economic Development in KwaZulu-Natal, and there was talk about infrastructure. How he became Deputy President, and there was talk of infrastructure. How he left office as Deputy President, and there was talk of infrastructure. How he came back as President, and there was talk. So what we've done is, using infrastructure as an example, we've created a coordinating commission, bringing together the three spheres of government with active delivery. So what we do now is every quarter we give Cabinet a dashboard showing across about 200 projects where we are. We can tell you, for example, in the last 3 months, how much has been spent in Medupi on the build program to build the coal-fired power station, what percentage of the construction project is completed, and if there were delays, why? Was it a strike? Was it a contractor that didn't deliver? Was it a problem at the ports of entry? Where is the problem? And so getting that information in real time, not after the event, allows the state to intervene more effectively, to go there. So that's one thing. The other thing that we do is we recognize we've created unintentionally many handcuffs for ourselves. We have a regulatory system that doesn't only affect the private sector. Bad news for all of us, it also constrains the public sector in important ways. I have a graph that I showed the conference yesterday of an example where Eskom wanted to do a transmission line rollout. And one part of that line took 12 years to roll out between conception and implementation. Not because lack of skills, we had skilled people, not lack of capital, we had the money in the budget, but we were constrained by 6 years of the 12 years was taken up by problems and challenges around environmental impact assessments and questions of land, expropriation of land. So litigants took us to court. The legislation at the time was quite clumsy, and we've begun to fix those. So we've got to get the regulatory side right. But the third and perhaps most important issue is accountability. Accountability means that there must be consequence when you don't deliver. So we now have called in as the PICC, mayors and premiers and ministers to help us work through why is there underspending on infrastructure. What are the specific reasons and what is the turnaround strategy? So we think it's this kind of more active management of taking the great vision and implementing it effectively that needs to lie at the heart of everything we do, whether it's education or health or infrastructure or industrial funding. It's got to be that more active management across the state, the three spheres, and with the private sector. On the foreign direct investment, we remain a destination of choice for quite important investment, and I gave the example of the auto sector. We want to do more of that. So recently, in the last few months, we've had the announcement of two key FDI investments, one by Toyota and the other one by Chinese manufacturer, BAW, in which both have decided to set up manufacturing facilities to assemble the ubiquitous minibus taxi. Since 2007, we've been importing some 20,000 taxis a year. We now have companies, foreign investors saying, there's opportunity in this market, there's growth potential in this market, we're going to establish ourselves here. So we see that we need to do more on FDI, but we can't just look at the annual trends. When you have a big injection of FDI, as you have with the Walmart transaction, the next year, if you don't have anything like that, then of course your numbers are going to come down. For us, the key is to try to attract foreign direct investment to key parts of manufacturing, to the mining value chain, and in agro-processing. And that's where we think we're getting some good news. Also, by the way, Karima, on the green economy, lots of interest, lots of foreign investors that have been looking around at the opportunities of our green energy policy, and there are some very significant opportunities. The last speaker raised the issue of cadre deployment. I think the message that Cabinet is coming out very clearly is now we want to hold public servants and public representatives accountable, and that means delivery. So our whole outcomes-based system, which, yes, it's taken us a bit of time to get to the point where now it's very clear. It measures impact and outcome. Not your pedigree, not where you come from, but how effective you are in helping to achieve government policy. Conflict of interest, I recognize, and Cabinet recognize, this is something that we absolutely have to stamp out. It's incompatible with good public service that the people who are the regulators and the implementers of policy also want a little bit of the action on the other side. You can't have that conflict of interest at the heart of implementation of government, and we are going to be taking steps on that.
Can we have the next three questions, please? Can we have mics quickly? Whilst the mics are getting to the gentleman that's going to put up the questions, Minister, take us through some of the discussions inside the plenary and inside the commissions. You were talking about a graph that you had put. Had you made a presentation to the delegates on the new growth path, for example, and how close are we to them accepting the growth path as ANC policy?
The new growth path has already been accepted as ANC policy. It was endorsed by the NEC of the ANC when it was, at the time when it was released. And in fact, the new growth path surfaced at the National General Council of the ANC that was held in 2010. So yesterday, what I did was to do a presentation on the National Infrastructure Plan, to say, here are the 18 strategic integrated projects. This is what it will mean to get more iron ore mined in the Northern Cape in Sishen, and what we will do to the rail line to move it to Saldanha. What in Saldanha will we do to try to beneficiate more of that iron ore? It was that kind of discussion, taking the new growth path concept and translating it into the practical steps, not only that we will take, but some that we've begun to take. And we shared that with plenary. So it was really an opportunity to bring government's work to the ANC, but also to get a discussion in the ANC about making the infrastructure plan a multi-administration goal.
Excellent. Can we have those questions quickly, gentlemen?
Thank you, Minister Maurice Radebe, representing the African Mineral and Energy Forum. It's both a question and a comment. First, I really think we have a problem at the local government, as we've all said. The question is, what are we going to do about it practically? And first, I'd like to challenge all business that we should really all focus on project management skills at the practical level, particularly to our municipal managers and all the officials there. But the real question is, how can we partner with government to upscale and upskill and coordinate this entire effort? Because this is a major, major, major focal point of lack of delivery there. Thanks.
Second question, Donald.
Thank you, Minister. This is Bonga Gwena from Alexander Forbes Group. My question really is with reference to the triple challenges. I want to focus specifically on unemployment and poverty. If one looks at the different sectors, if you look at the mining sector, I think it's got its own challenges. You look into the, say the farming sector, there's some serious challenges there. You look in the broad sort of manufacturing sector there's some serious dynamics there, and challenges of some of the players like China dropping a lot of goods in here, cheaper prices and so on and so forth. So in my view, if I look at various sectors, I'm battling to find one specific sector that's going to give us the significant number of jobs that are actually created. So my question is to you, which sector do you think, Minister, actually presents us as a country with an opportunity where we really can see significant number of jobs that are created? So that's one part of the question. Then quickly, we know that if many of our citizens actually lack opportunities of being employed, we know that we've got a lot of young people coming up with a sort of poor standard of education, a lot of sort of school leaver type sort of certificates. They just have no hope to find, employment. And we know that a hungry stomach basically is a source of all evil. A hungry stomach cannot rationalize. A hungry stomach has got no sort of respect for law. And of course, that will breed crime, because your challenge is a daily challenge. If I'm hungry now, I can't find food. If I can't resort to a dustbin, what do I do? It's to break sort of the next nearest car, or to commit like housebreaking somewhere else, because all what I'm looking for is to get that 10 rands or 20 rands to get myself like food. So it's a daily struggle. How do you, what is your view in terms of what can we do? What are the low-hanging fruits that actually presents themselves for us as a country, as business, as government, as all sort of players in our economical mainstream to address these issues? We know that the National Development Plan has got a long-term view, 20, 30 year, but what can we do in the meantime? We need that currency to almost buy the short term to give people hope.
The third question, please, just an appeal, keep the questions nice and tight so that everyone can get an opportunity.
Donald Presley from Business Report, independent newspapers. Some difficult questions I'm going to pose them as devil's advocate. You've spoken a lot about beefing up the manufacturing base of the country. But however, the figures from your own Trade and Industry Department show that the manufacturing base is actually contracting. And there's been a lot of talk about foundries having to close down because of massive Eskom electricity price hikes over the years, and more to come. Can they be pegged? Can we do something about Eskom from government side? Secondly, you speak about equitable salaries. Politicians earn ridiculous amounts of money. Ministers earn somewhere near 2 million a year. How can you, is it not hypocritical for politicians to be paid so much?
Right. Minister?
All right, well, let's start with the easy ones, which is the last ones, and then move progressively to the more difficult ones, which are about how to get our local government working. Well, Donald, I mean, sure, I'm sure you're chasing the headlines, so you've got to try to put the questions fairly sharply. But I think I hear what the question is. Let's start with income inequality as a core challenge that we face as a society. Whether it's in the mining sector, or in agriculture, or indeed in the public sector during the strike that we had last time round. One of the issues that comes up increasingly and repeatedly from workers is this vast gap between top and bottom. Now, when we engage with the private sector, we get the broad storyline, which we recognize that the private sector has to attract skills from a pool that is globally mobile, and that unless they pay competitive salaries, they're not going to be able to retain that. In the public sector, if we want to attract excellent skills, we have exactly the same challenge, that the state too competes with the private sector in a limited pool of skills. So we recognize that reality. But growth and long-term development sometimes mean that you've got to take the long view. Germany would not have been able to repair the deep damage of the Second World War, or Japan that of the enormous bombing campaign that it was subjected to, unless you could get a compact in which everybody in that society felt they were working towards common goals. So income inequality is not going to disappear. We're going to have to deal with it. As public representatives, we have to articulate that. We took the view recently that, based on discussions with business and labor, that we needed to take an important symbolic step. And that is to agree to pursue in our respective areas, we do it in the public sector, others do it in the private sector, a wage freeze for a one-year period. And at the same time, put together a task team to look at the international experience of income inequality. So we have to do that. Brazil, by the way, started off with a Gini coefficient, the measure of income inequality, roughly the same as South Africa. It has improved its equity very significantly. So there's international experience that these things can work. So I think, you know, I raise these, it's like, I know there's a business audience. It's like talking to turkeys about Christmas, the virtues of Christmas. But we need you, we need the executive in government and the senior management in the public sector to all be hearing the challenge of income inequality coming from fellow South Africans and to respond as positively as we can. The manufacturing base is enormously challenging for us. And that's why you've seen a number of key announcements that we will be elaborating early in the new year to try to ensure that we build a physical platform for manufacturing which starts with the steel industry. When Anglo recently decided that it wanted to divest from score metals, the IDC stepped in what is arguably one of the most important investments the IDC is making to retain a very important strategic manufacturing capability that is vital to not only engineering, but all the downstream activities, infrastructure, and so on. So we recognize that one of our challenges has been the global slowdown has knocked South Africa's exports, particularly to the European Union. Look at the trade numbers, it's very, very clear. Europe remains the major destination for South African manufactured goods. China is very important, but we sell largely raw materials to China, and we sell manufactured goods to Europe. So our job now is, in addition to wishing Europe well and doing whatever we can as a responsible global citizen to support global growth, we also have to expand and diversify our own sources of manufacturing growth. Above all, that means the African continent. So in June last year, President Zuma convened a meeting of 26 heads of state and government to talk about an FTA that will embrace 600 million Africans with a GDP of over $1 trillion. That's vital. We've got to speed up those talks because that's where the source of growth for our foundries and our manufacturing sector lies. Of course, we've got to diversify our trade relations with China, with India, with Brazil. We can't simply be the supplier of raw materials to the factories of the world. We've got to be able to create that. So therefore, this decision by the Chinese auto manufacturer to set up an assembly plant here in Springs in South Africa was an important early signal of the kind of things that we want to get right in that relationship. We need to do more of that. Recently, Cisco Steel, a company that manufactures steel using scrap metal, closed down. So, Donald, you may have given that as an example. We've now worked with a foreign investor that's come in, bought the plant, and is going to, in fact, restart production there. So those are the kind of examples of what we're doing to turn that around. I think I've taken most, Karima, of your time with Donald's question. Very briefly to the colleague from Alexander Forbes, where can we grow? If you're looking for jobs numbers, if you're looking for quantity of jobs, agriculture is the important and missing story in South Africa. You know, any number of analysis. We've put analysis of India, Brazil, China, and South Africa next to each other. What's the critical difference in the industrial structure? Is the absence of agriculture as a major employer of labor in South Africa and as a contributor to GDP. So that's why one of the jobs drivers in the new growth path is indeed agriculture. We've seen modest growth in the last year in agricultural jobs, but nothing close to the scale of what is required to be able to absorb large numbers of South Africans into paid employment. And the first question, how you as business can partner? Well, I think I want to compliment the Progressive Business Forum for this kind of session that it sets up. It may well be that a good idea would be business and local government opportunities for partnership. There's an idea. We're doing some good things. We've got a strategic integrated project. We've targeted the 23 poorest districts in the country. They're also the areas, not only where people earn the least, but where service delivery is often the weakest, and where the opportunity to work together is potentially greatest. So I wish I had a bit more time to go into the detail of some of the things we're doing, but I think perhaps a forum like this where we can elaborate some of the successful partnerships, highlight them, and encourage more businesses to join us in that.